but when I hear guesstimate, it still doesn't instill confidence.
If you want to send an email to the central office, we can get you historical data from the last decade of NASDAQ projections, if that's helpful.
Yeah, just the accuracy of what their
I see.
forecast was versus what the actual was.
Absolutely, we could get that for you, surely.
I'm sure everybody here would like to see that too, actually.
Yeah, Jim Monahan, 305 West Main Street. This has to do with the town budget, and I noticed the benefits went up over 7%, which is, from my experience, just from business, exceptionally large. And I know this followed up last year. I recall looking at the salary increases; they were pretty significant. So I'd like some little bit of understanding as why the benefits are going up such a large percentage.
Mr. Manning?
I can defer that to the CFO, but pretty much the health insurance went up quite a bit, but you can elaborate.
Okay, so I'm looking at the town manager here, and the salaries are separate from the benefits, so that's not a salary increase in the benefits section.
No, I understand.
So the benefit would be comprised of our contributions to our pension plan and the payment for retirees for health care and health insurance for the workforce. And so health insurance has been a challenge, and I don't have more detail than that right now.
Can you clarify for the moderator's benefit, does that also take into account growth in the covered population within town? In other words, is it reflective of the increase in the number of school department employees and other employees within the town?
So all the employees would be in there, and all the retirees that are non-school retirees for health care, and the school retirees as well for health care would be in there.
Are these contractual issues that we're bound by these numbers, or are these, I mean, because businesses have to deal with this all the time. If your health insurance goes up 7%, then I know I'm going to be bearing probably about 7% more. So I'm just trying to understand why it went up 7%. I think we all understand that health benefits, health costs go up, but it's just unusual that they seem to be borne by the town, and it should be a little more equally distributed between the towns and those who receive the benefits.
If I may, through the town moderator as well as on behalf of town staff, I want to say good evening. It's an honor to serve this community. It's even more exciting to have the front row seat working with the very capable volunteer teams facilitating some of these discussions at town meeting. Specific to your question, general insurance went up because of the new buildings that we have brought online. Health insurance, at the time we were putting the budget together, health insurance was projected to go up by 6.7%. I can assure you that based on our current negotiations, that number will come in lower than 6.7%. And that's the money that may eventually either flow back to free cash or be used to fund other expenses at Town Hall. So your question is spot on. Again, in summary, general insurance went up because of new buildings. Health insurance is 6.7. I think if you look at the market based on what we received, generally the providers were looking at their increases are 8%.
Okay, thank you.
Gary Trendle, 31 Chamberlain Street. Through the moderator, I also have a question for the school administration. And I recognize that most of the budget is related to personnel, and I know how impacted it is by school enrollment figures, but I have a question about another part of the budget. We've invested a lot in the last 20 years in the schools, and I'm curious if you can provide any additional detail on maintenance budgets, what's being done to maintain our schools, and what's, in general, just how are we ensuring that they're going to serve us well for the next 50 years?
Sure. I'll ask Mrs. Rodmick to come up because she oversees building and grounds.
So I can't tell you off the top of my head what the total maintenance budget is, but I can tell you that we have a very robust preventive maintenance program in place. Every asset has been loaded into a work order system. Every asset has a preventive maintenance schedule detailing exactly what will be done and when it will be done. Tickets pop up, so we know exactly how much is being done from a preventive maintenance, but also from a repair standpoint. So we can keep track, and that's how we build our capital plan, and so that we're not putting more good money after something that really should just be replaced. Is that helpful?
Yeah, if I could just ask a follow-up question. Do you have any details on how our maintenance budget has increased or decreased versus prior years?
I would say that it is increasing. One thing is bringing online the Marathon building. Now, one of the things that we did not have to do through the building project, we were able to.
Committee here, the $92 million budget, can you explain, is it any part of it involving an override, or is it all within the bounds of?
Manning.
Yes, this year's budget is all within the Prop 2.5. There is no override needed.
That we're binding everything together? I don't see how that affects your budget. And I'm a
No.
former member of the school committee for Keefe Tech, so that's why I'm asking.
Yes, it does not. We do pay for Norfolk Aggie. Yeah, we pay for Norfolk Aggie. This year, we had 20 students who were at Keefe Tech. Next year, we will have 27 students at Keefe Tech. You probably noticed the number that comes out of an outside budget, and that went up about $158,000 with those additional 7 students.
But can you explain how that affects your budget?
Yeah,
What you're planning?
the kids who attend Keefe Tech do not affect our budget per se. It just affects the town side budget.
Thank you.
Good evening, John Graziano, 8 Kimball Road. I have, I think, what might be 2 questions through the moderator on the first one, because it's more of a procedural question. This article seems to do 2 very different things. The first one is dealing with the operating budget, and the second one is a non-binding resolution to support an upcoming ballot question. And I'm curious if, I don't know if this is for town council or the town manager, why is this in one article when it seems to be 2 very distinct actions?
Is there any practical effect to the non-binding resolution? There is no practical effect to the non-binding resolution language.
Well, then I question why we're voting on it if there's no practical application to it. But,
Well, why not? It will have no effect.
the second question, since it's on there and there's no practical application, but I do know there's a ballot question for either appropriations or the Board of Selectmen, I noticed that the untaxed levy is going down from FY19 to the FY20 budget. So my question would be, what's the wisdom of an underride when what we're hearing about is...
That's a separate article. We'll take that up under the...
It's in this article. It's right there. That was my first question.
Oh, give me 1 second. Oh, okay. All right, I'm wrong. Originally, it had been planned as a separate article. So at this stage, this is bundled as both combination of a vote on the 92.7 million article as well as the underride.
So I mean, the answer I got on the first question was because the second one doesn't do anything, but presumably we're all going to at least take a binding vote at the ballot. So my question is, given the fact that the untaxed levy is going down from FY19 to FY20, and we're hearing in all the presentations about the increased need for services with the schools, with public safety, and additionally we're up to the 2.5% limit this year. What would be the wisdom of an underride right now when it seems to potentially handcuff the town in future years if we have unexpected increases?
Two things. One, can we put up the slide that had the excess levy demonstration? And then who would like to tackle the question, Mr. Manning or Mr. Kamalo? Or Ms. Wright? Or someone else? Not that this is a difficult question.
Yes. I will try. Let me explain at least my understanding of why this article is included in the budget. Twofold. From my discussions with the selectmen, transparency is key. Whilst this is not a practical issue, I think the feeling is that we will always give town meeting the opportunity to discuss budget-related matters. So it's for transparency. And then number two, because the amount of the underride is tied to the excess levy, which is discussed in the budget, it is therefore appropriate to discuss this item alongside the budget. Then specific to your question, looking forward, based on the information we know and are aware of currently, we did not, at least from our viewpoint, identify any risk to the town going forward. If you look at the history of the underride in this town, this is the third time the town is considering an underride. Because of the new growth, because of the free cash that was certifying through the diligence and good management of the budgets by different town departments, and also because of our conservative approach to developing the budget, as well as the generosity of the community in funding the rainy day fund, we believe, at least from my perspective, I believe that there is no risk posed to the town going forward.
Sorry, can I ask,
21 budget
and potentially beyond?
and beyond, when the ceiling is higher.
Right.
But no impact on anyone's tax bill, one way or the other, in 2020, and no impact on the 2020 budget.
Historically, just as an historical point, the underrides that had been passed in prior years have been presented as separate articles.
Question actually to both Mr. Manning and to the school administration, or these items I'm trying to clarify in my own mind. Mr. Manning, you were talking about new growth and the projected new growth, and it was going down this year, and it's projected to go down every year until 2023, according to the handout that we received. If new growth is going down, how does that inform the school budget? I guess I'm wondering, do these two items talk to each other, or are they totally separate? I understood you to say that new growth had something to do with the amount of building that was being done in town.
Mr. Manning.
So when we calculate what our budget is, we essentially can take our overall budget, the increase, we subtract the new growth and the other parts of the calculation,
Right.
but it gives you, here's what the tax levy is on the taxpayers. So as an example, if the overall town increases 5% and that new growth represents 2.5% or 3%, make it 3%, then the tax levy is 2%. So it's really,
Okay.
if our new growth is decreasing, then it's going to, and the schools are still growing, that could be a structural problem, being that now that it's going to have to be through a tax levy or other sources of funding. It just gets a little more challenging. So that's why I was trying to paint the picture about new growth going down. Right now, we've been I can say we've been fortunate with the new growth that it allows us to adjust to the growth in the schools or other, in the past few years, it helped us adapt to the marathon school, the other schools, when we were
Between Whalen and Chamberlain, condos all over Main Street. I just don't get how we can be projecting that new growth is going to go down. Then we heard from the school committee. Yeah, it's still growth. It is. It's growth. And then we're hearing from the school board that, in fact, they're projecting, possibly 130 new students for next year. These things don't seem to equate to me, and I guess I don't know whether I'm the only one that's confused by this, or I'm just was hoping someone might be able to explain the difference between the two.
Norman?
Through the moderator, if I may, after the developments at legacy farms are complete, new growth will go down.
Okay.
Yes. Because we don't have another legacy farms where we're getting a very high number of units per year. So currently, if we have 20 new permits per year, we're adding those 20 new permits to about 50 or 60 permits from legacy farms. After legacy farms is done, we'll only be getting the 32, the 20, without the 50 or 60 coming from legacy farms.
All right. On my right?
Connie Wright, 25 Amherst Road. So please bear with me. I want to see if we can pull up 3 slides. One is either the second or third slide that discussed, for lack of better words, the potential underfunding of pension or post-retirement. I don't know if you can find it.
Well, go ahead with your question while they're trying to get the slide.
Because I need that.
This is in the general presentation.
Right. Not quite. It was the one right before, I think. It was the one before with the pie chart. But the whole discussion is that we mentioned and recommended that we weren't funding something fully, mostly, if I recall, post-retirement benefits. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we haven't funded them completely. Then we have the underwrite slide, which we just had up there, which had a suggestion. And then we had what the school presented was the fact that we've had over additional students causing an impact. And when I put those 3 slides together, my question is, if we propose this underride, what does it do to our rainy day fund? Because I think we have nothing left, and we have nothing. We are underfunding a pension plan. We have no capacity to deal with growth. And I'm all for lower taxes, but then we have an impact in subsequent years, which we heard we might get relief in 2020, but then we get an impact in 2021. So what does the underride do to our quote-unquote rainy day fund?
Through the moderator.
Go ahead, Mr. Kamalo.
The underride, if it passes, has no effect on the rainy day fund.
So we do not touch the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund stays at $1.9 million?
No.
What's our rainy day fund number?
It's 4 point? It's $4.3 million.
$4.3 million, so less than 10% of our budget.
Correct. Our target is 5%.
So it doesn't add to, but you're saying it has a 0 impact on our rainy day fund.
Correct.
Okay.
On my left?
Hi, Hari Chalapali, 51 Greenwood Road. My question's for the school committee. You outlined clearly, why there was an increase in the school budget, mainly attributable to the increase in personnel, which in turn is attributed to the increase in enrollment. My question relates to where we are with physical capacity of the different schools. As my kindergartner grows up and comes through these school systems, is there a concern looming on the horizon in terms of physical capacity that we need to be worried about?
There is, and thank you for that question. As you know, we've just built the Marathon Elementary School. At this point, we have filled those classrooms, but we are feeling very comfortable that that building is able to accommodate the students who are entering into pre-K, K, and 1. On April 12th, we had a deadline to submit a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority to do a renovation and construction project over at the Elmwood School. Right now, Elmwood is sort of nearing capacity. If we needed additional spaces for our 2 and 3 classrooms, we would need to probably dismantle, a health room and put health on a cart, dismantle an art room and put art on a cart. So what we are trying to do is prevent that. Right now, Hopkins is probably in need of classrooms in the next couple of years. Most of those classrooms there are full. Again, we would be looking at a model where art gets on a cart, right? In the back of the Hopkins School, in the original designs, there are places where you could, in fact, put portable classrooms. The middle school, right now we have a tech. The Education Collaborative rents space from us here. There's also a meeting room in the front of the school. There is a principal's conference room. Those rooms could be transferred to classroom space if we needed to do that. Last Friday morning, we met with architects to take a look at the drawings for the high school. When the high school was built 20 years ago, there were 2 wings on the back, and one of those wings was built out at only 2/3, so there is a space there where you could put pretty readily 6 additional classrooms. All the HVAC, all the plumbing, everything is there for that. So we're trying to get a price on additional classrooms for the high school. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you tonight that we need to do something with our physical plants to accommodate the increase in enrollment. Absolutely. And when we look at those numbers of 103 or 130 or whatever that is, if these kids come into our school and they are evenly distributed, so 10 students per grade level, we're going to be able to absorb that. If children come into our school so that we have 30 kids, for example, in grade 6, we're not going to be able to absorb that, and it's going to require more personnel and obviously more space to build out teams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On my right.
Shahidul Manan, 274 Ash Street. I have a question for the town manager and team. I am part of the appropriations committee, but this is a question as a private citizen. And my question is, we looked at the OPEB fund scenario where we see that our obligation is about 27 million, and we are funding half of what the actuaries are advising us, which is 800,000, and we are funding about...
Hey, thank you, sir, for the question through the moderator.
Go ahead.
We faced a similar situation several years ago before I was in town with the pension liability, and there was a mandate, and we got onto a glide path to fully fund the pension liability by 2036, and we're on track to do that. Shortly after that, the idea of the OPEB liability came up, and there is no statutory or regulatory requirement to fund it at all, just to report it at this point. So on one level, we're very forward-looking in doing anything. Many communities are not doing anything, and we're doing something. And what we're doing is funding at about half of the level you pointed out of what the actuary recommended. So the actuary recommended paths to fund it at a level that would have it fully funded by 2047, and the path we're on is a long game, as you said, in the 2090s to get it fully funded. It's possible that at some point we'll face a mandate from the state regulator who will tell us we have to get onto that glide path, but until then we are taking half steps toward funding that liability. And my understanding is it's in competition with other needs like teachers, a new police sergeant, a public health nurse, and so there's a balancing process in which you're evaluating how much do you want to weight the needs for current services today, and how much do you want to pay down your future bills. And I would say this has been a middle path that we have taken. Anything else?
Yes, again, this is a good question. At the moment, we are funding our OPEB liability through field cash. We are going to begin a discussion that will look at other ways of funding the plan that was put together for us by our consultant. Those options may include direct taxation or may also include borrowing. So again, thank you for a good question. We have ideas as to what the plan is, as well as how we're going to fund the plan going forward.
Through the moderator, I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So thank you for that response. I just want to point out we are one of the lowest in all of the towns in Massachusetts. As you know, we are probably in the lowest quadrant in terms of OPEB funding. Just wanted to point out, I think, Tim, you know that. But a subsequent question I had, since we touched the point of growth as well, and on the budget we made a point that our growth related or new development related new revenue is going to be about 2 million or 1.8 million and then a little bit lower. But even with that, it seems we are anticipating almost 200 new dwellings every year in the next 3 years. And that is reflected on our budget's revenue side forecasted. But are we also accounting that growth in all our services, reflecting how the cost is going to grow? And if we are able to handle that growth on the schools, on the DPW, on our fire department, police, and all the services?
Sir, through the moderator, thank you for that question. Excellent question. I think probably the biggest planning priority the town has is to understand growth, because we are on track for it to occur, and the debate using the school consulting group is whether we hit certain growth points in 2038 or 2028. It's really the tempo of the growth. So our top priority for planning should be on planning for growth. It's more important to understand how the costs respond to growth than it is to understand exactly when it's going to happen. So I think you heard the school department talk about the needs when you get beyond the few students, and you have to start talking about adding janitors or librarians or more school resource officers. And I would say that we do not have a complete answer on that now.
I'm going to cut this off at this point. Let's remember, we're talking about the upcoming budget year. We're not talking about years that are beyond fiscal year 20.
Thank you. I think that makes sense, but it is related because we are also talking about underwrite. But I'll, I think, stop here and let others speak. Thank you.
On my left.
Hi, Joe Markey, 39 Ash Street. Regarding the third bullet up there, it says town financial management policies to achieve and maintain a balance of 5% of the general fund operating budget in the general stabilization fund. And that's all right, I memorized it. It will be approximately 4.4% if the proposed budget is adopted. So regarding the town financial management policy, I'd like to ask through you, Mr. Moderator, the Appropriation Committee, if they support that policy. Is that an Appropriation Committee policy in effect, or a CFO driven?
That's an interesting question. Is that a Board of Selectmen policy? Is that appropriations? Town
If
manager?
it helps, another way to put it, in the deliberations leading up to this, did the Appropriation Committee discuss the General Stabilization Fund, and do they have an opinion on the current funding?
So this is the town's financial management policy that was adopted by the town, and this represents good guidelines. And we've never actually been at 5%, and I believe the stabilization fund, we've been trying to grow it for the past 11 years. We've been making good progress, but we're not quite there yet. But this is really the standard of where we would like to be, and but it's not hard in stone. It's just good financial policy.
Okay. Follow-up question. If we could flip back to the wording of this article, the slide that was originally up there, it talks about number 2 there, support a non-binding resolution. Did the Appropriation Committee take a vote on Article 10 and specifically on that Section 2, the non-binding resolution?
Or do you mean the non-binding resolution or more specifically, the inclusion of an underride?
Well, given that we're talking about not using the full tax, amount available, I'm trying to get a view on the Appropriation Committee opinion on this budget, and in particular on the non-binding resolution regarding the underride, given that we've just heard a few examples where we're underfunding things.
Mr. Manning.
So the Appropriation Committee didn't take a discussion specifically on the underride. In fact, we didn't, just like the moderator, we didn't even know it was bundled in this article until this evening. So, but as we were discussing, as we saw it prior to this evening's town meeting, we did discuss it a little bit that we weren't going to vote against the operational budget because it's a non-binding, and we also know that basically the town can support the underride, although we haven't discussed it, but we don't think it has anything material on this year's budget, so we didn't take a position specifically on the underride.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just conclude with my opinion, I guess, is as we're going through this rapid period of growth, and we see that growth will continue, but not at the rate that we've seen in the last couple of years, the demand for town services will follow that growth, and I'd like us to be in as strong a position as we can moving forward from this year forward. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
On my right.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mary Jo Undrigan, 2 College Street. Given that the proposed underride will cause the town to lose 40% of its levy capacity, and given that the town has had many surprise expenses in the past year, and given that nobody is going to get a tax rebate as a result of any underride, I submit, Mr. Moderator, that the town should have a voice in whether this proposed underride is prudent. So therefore, I propose an amendment, or I propose that we vote separately on the underride.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay. So it's been proposed that the question of the underride within this article be voted on separately. I'll entertain discussion on that motion at this point. Is there any further discussion? Is there any continuing confusion as to the way this will operate? On my left.
Mr. Moderator, Russell Shade, 7 Summer Street. Forgive me if I'm ignorant of some of this process. I'm fairly new to the whole town meeting situation. I'm just curious to hear that the moderator and the Appropriations Committee were unclear that this was a part of this article until tonight. How does that happen? Are these articles not made available for review beforehand? I don't understand how both the moderator and the Appropriations Committee are sitting here saying we're reading something at town meeting that we didn't know was a part of the article until we arrived here tonight. If either you or the Appropriations Committee could shed some light on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, at this,
if I may,
at the risk of kicking it to the people that control the warrant articles, I'll turn to Mr. Khumalo.
Yes. To be clear, I understand the town moderator as well as the Appropriations Committee to be referring to the motions. They were not referring to the articles. You are correct. The motions were published yesterday.
So the articles were not published until tonight? The moderator and the Appropriations Committee didn't have the opportunity to review them?
You know what? Let me interrupt. I mean, that's really ancillary to the discussion. The discussion at this point is on the motion that has been made.
And I approve the motion.
Okay. So do you have comments on the separate vote with respect to the underride proposal?
No, sir.
Okay. Then I'm going to move to the right.
I have questions on the budget.
Please come to the microphone.
I have questions on the budget and a school question, so not to the motion.
Okay, we're on the motion to separate votes here. Is there any further discussion with respect to separating these motions?
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. Could we scroll down
Name and...
John Graziano, 8 Kimball Road. Keep going. So I think that, and I apologize, I don't remember the gentleman who preceded me at the mic. I think his question is actually pretty valid because what it says up there is Appropriation Committee recommends approval. And
that still holds.
But they just said they didn't vote on it. They didn't know it was in there, so how can they recommend? So, and again, I think the reason I'm up here is because I think that's a valid question if...
Hold on a second. Mr. Manning, would you address the position of the Appropriations Committee with respect to Article 10 as it is currently constructed?
They said they weren't aware of it.
So we voted on it essentially
They voted without...
to approve the operational budget, and we also did see today that there was a non-binding part to have a underride. So since it's non-binding and there's still a vote, it really has no overall impact on the operational budget. So we could have revoted it, we could have discussed it, but we don't have a particular position on the underride itself. Our position is approving the budget.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, clarification, so you did not vote on the underride section of that at all?
We did not take a specific vote, but we were voting on the overall operational budget.
Okay. So I'm going to say I support the amendment, but I do also question, and I don't know if town council can weigh in on the appropriateness of it, given what the document says.
Well, again, I don't see a need for that, but let me try to clarify this circumstance. With a motion before us to separate votes, let's say that passes, that we agree to separate votes, and let's say you vote down the underride, okay? Then what happens at the ballot doesn't matter. Effectively, it won't be before us.
No, I don't think that's true.
It is true. If this meeting doesn't vote, if we separate the issues, and we have a separate vote on an underride, and this meeting turns that underride down, you vote at the ballot box, it has no effect.
The vote tonight has no effect.
No.
He's nodding when I said that.
I'll correct myself. The fact that it says non-binding, you're right.
Yes. And I'll leave the microphone, but okay. I think the expedient thing to do would actually be to remove it entirely and not vote on it tonight, since it doesn't matter.
Well, we have a motion to separate. At this point, we have a motion to separate votes. So we've got to continue along with consideration of that separation. Am I right?
Mr. Moderator, I, as the maker of the motion, I would accept instead to simply delete the underride section, the non-binding underride part of the budget.
Are you rescinding your original motion? No. Are you rescinding your original motion?
Yes, I'm willing to rescind the original motion in favor of an amendment to simply delete the non-binding vote on the underride.
Does the vote at the ballot box have any effect? Okay. All right. So a motion has been made to... A motion has been made to remove, and I assume it's been seconded, to remove the language that relates to a non-binding resolution, which has no effect anyway. Is there any discussion on the revised motion to remove the language relating to a non-binding resolution?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
John Palmer, 87 Main Street. Before I vote on this, I would like to understand what the pros and the cons are of the underride. I need that so I can make an intelligent vote.
Who would like to, Mr. Manning, would you like to take a shot at that?
Mr. Moderator, sir, thank you. The town prepared a paper that compared the pros and cons of the underride. Is that the question? And the pros were identified as being that an underride would signal a commitment to control spending at current levels rather than baselining spending on a levy limit that accumulated over a long period, that it would require specific override discussions for substantial future spending increase proposals with more focus than the normal budget process provides, that it would drive town administrators to focus on cost control, and that it may signal conservatism to lenders, which could enhance the perception of credit worthiness for us. And we noted the very high importance we place on our AAA bond rating, which saves us about 7.1% in costs on our debt service. The pros also pointed out that if exigent conditions arise, an underride can be reversed by an override by the same voting bodies with the same approval requirements after conscious public consideration of specific circumstances. We identified some cons, and we pointed out that a long-standing unused tax levy may be considered an element of financial strength and discipline, and if so, the elimination of the unused tax levy could reduce the perception of creditworthiness. We pointed out that for bond rating purposes, the existing unused levy may offset other weaknesses like the town's stabilization fund status, which was $459,000 below the target threshold at the time the paper was written. We pointed out that an ongoing cycle of alternating underrides and overrides could degrade investor and stakeholder confidence, and we pointed out that the elimination of unused levy could restrict consideration of meritorious service and investment opportunities to the town's long-term detriment. And then we provided a little sensitivity analysis of what the underride tax impact would be in the out years. And the Board of Selectmen held a lengthy debate on those pros and cons and came to a vote to recommend the underride. That is the analysis that was provided right down the middle. I think identifying robust sets of pros and cons.
Thank you. On my right?
Muriel Kramer, 39 North Street. I just wanted to, this is moving pretty fast. Are there two votes needed, one at town meeting and one at the ballot for an underride, or only the vote at the ballot is necessary for the underride?
Only the ballot at the, on May 20 is necessary.
Okay.
Because this has been presented as a non-binding resolution.
Okay. I just want to make a comment. The first comment we had from the town manager when this question started to be asked was, in the interest of transparency, we did it this way, and I think that this way was the wrong way to do it. People didn't know what to expect and how to interact with this.
On my left.
Don Wilson, 4 Schofield. Just looking for clarification. If we remove the underride from this article tonight, will the underride still appear at the ballot box?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
On my right?
Frank Durso, 173 Saddle Hill Road. I think we should leave the situation as it is and vote on it as it is non-binding, as we've been told several times. I think that this Board of Selectmen has worked together very well, Democrats, Republican, Independents. As elected officials, they've represented our management needs of the town and come up with an excellent budget that an underride possibility. The Appropriation Committee has done an excellent job supporting the numbers and presenting their numbers, and I think the fiscally responsible thing to do is to move ahead and vote on this non-binding.
Okay, again, we're having a discussion on an amendment to remove the language relating to the non-binding resolution. Is there further discussion on that motion to amend? Okay, if there's no further discussion on that motion, we'll take a vote on a motion to remove the language relating to the non-binding resolution. All those in favor of removing the language relating to the non-binding resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. That's a clear majority. Now we return to the main motion under the article. Is there any further discussion on the budget?
I have a question. My name is Jackie Potenzoni, 12 Wood Street. It's on preparation of enrollment. I want to say the school presentation was fabulous. I moved here in the late 90s and the boom in the 90s. I've had 3 children go through the Hopkinton public school system. Education is very important to me still, even though my children aren't in the school system. When my daughter came here in 2nd grade, her class was the largest class that Hopkinton had seen at that point. Accommodations were made that to keep class sizes down, 2 classrooms went to center school, the rest of the kids, the kids were at Elmwood at that time. She was at Elmwood, but 2 classes went to center. They bused them back and forth during events. That way they could have smaller class sizes and keep the students together during events. My son's, when he was in Elmwood School, that was the year the modular classrooms were added. And I was at first very apprehensive to hear my son was going to be in a modular classroom, but I will say it was a very good classroom. It was a way to add size to the school and keep class sizes down. You had said that if we get enrollment over the grades, we can handle it. But if we get active enrollment in 6th grade or other grades, we won't be able to handle it. What are you doing in preparation of the budget, in the school budget, to deal with that enrollment if it happens? We're going into the busy real estate season. People are going to be selling their houses. Is there any plans to look at the schools to get modular classrooms added where they can? Can Marathon Elementary School that we just built accommodate something like that if enrollment does increase, that you can't handle the kindergarten enrollment for that school, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade? What are you doing in preparation of that?
Dr. Kavanaugh?
So I do like that you are asking this question. I think for FY20, we're not going to need to worry about modular classrooms. As I had explained to a previous questioner, we would be able to do things like art on a cart or health on a cart. But we are looking at an SOI at Elmwood, as I said, adding high school classrooms, and we may need to put modular classrooms over at Hopkins. Someone had asked about how we sort of monitor enrollment. It's very difficult to do that because when someone sells an existing home in Hopkinton and someone else buys that home, we don't know if it will be a family with 3 school-age children, 2 school-age children, 5, or no school-age children. And as I've said, Welcome Wagon has been exceedingly helpful to us in this because they're giving us numbers even of preschool-aged children so that we can kind of watch where that's happening. So I will tell you that we are monitoring numbers daily, and if we do get a great influx at a particular grade level, we are prepared in terms of our physical plants to handle that. We will need to hire faculty. That will have to happen. A very good example is kindergarten last year. We had planned on 12 kindergarten classrooms, and we were going to split paraprofessionals, 1 para for every 2 classrooms. What we ended up doing was hiring paras and keeping the class sizes at 21, which is technically high for kindergarten. It wouldn't be high in 4th grade at all, but at kindergarten it is. So we do make modifications as the school year begins, and we try to keep class sizes low and our kids in good classrooms.
Mr. Moderator, I just want to ask Dr. Kavanaugh one more question. Have you looked at all of the schools to see if you can add modular classrooms, or is it only specific schools that would be able to have them?
Some of the schools, when they were drawn, actually had places where you could put those classrooms. So, for example, Hopkins has that place in the back. What we really would like to do is to add those 6 classrooms to the high school, physically attach them to the high school, because everything is there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Weismantel.
Ken Weismantel, 145 Ash Street. I move the question.
Okay. Is there a second? All those in favor of ending debate on this topic? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We're ready for a vote on Article 10 as amended. All those in favor of Article 10 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And it's nearly unanimous and passes. $92.7 million. Article 11, fiscal year 2020 revolving fund spending limits. Board of Selectmen
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
and Mr. Manning.
Article 11, fiscal year 2020 revolving fund spending limits. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is recertifying or reapproving our revolving fund spending limits. These limits are basically the same as last year, essentially, but we have to reapprove them every year.
Any questions on this article? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous. Article 12, PEG Access Enterprise Fund. Board of Selectmen
Recommends approval.
and Mr. Manning.
Article 12, PEG Access Enterprise Fund. We move the article as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is setting up an enterprise fund for HCAM, essentially, and it's really to take in Comcast is providing the funding for this, so it's $50,000 going into this fund that we're creating.
Any questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous. Article 13, Chapter 90 Highway Funds. Board of Selectmen,
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital Improvements Committee,
Capital Improvements Committee recommends approval.
and then Mr. Manning.
Article 13, Chapter 90 Highway Funds. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is Chapter 90 funds. This represents the amount established to be paid by the state to support the town's pavement management plan and assist in maintaining the pavement condition index of the town.
Any questions? This is money coming to us from the state. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous. Article 14, transfer to General Stabilization Fund. Ms. Wright?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 14, transfer to the General Stabilization Fund. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is moving $208,000 from free cash into our General Stabilization Fund.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? So it's unanimous and so voted. Article 15, Establishment of School Department Stabilization Fund, acceptance of fourth paragraph of MGL Chapter 40, et cetera, et cetera. Board of Selectmen, Ms. Wright.
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
School Committee.
The School Committee recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Okay, Article 15, Establishment of School Department Stabilization Fund. Essentially, we move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is establishment of a stabilization fund, specifically to take money coming from legacy funds based on the host community agreement, and it's going to be a place where the town will hold the $500,000, and I believe in this motion is $200,000 to be transferred to the schools from the School Department Stabilization Fund to be used by the schools.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, a question, Mr. Moderator. Joe Markey, 39 Ash Street, and having been on the planning board when we did this with others here too, A question for appropriation. When you said the 500,000, is that due to the fact that Legacy Farms has in fact introduced more school-age children than was modeled in the host community agreement? And does it also include a per pupil fee for a number of students over that limit?
So this initial $500,000 is because the enrollment from Legacy Farms exceeded what was written in the host community agreement. And that $500,000 is not a part of the per pupil ongoing, I believe. But I do believe it will go into that fund, this fund, as we move forward.
Mr. Moderator, may I just speak to that for a minute, please?
Go ahead.
This fund requires town meeting to establish the stabilization fund with the 500,000 payment that has already been made because, as you explained, we have gone over the target. 200,000 has been requested by the school committee to give them access probably this fall when they get those additional enrollments so that they can access the funds without town meeting approval. Additional funds, as they come in with those later payments, as you referred to, going forward, those will be able to go directly into the fund. Future withdrawals from the fund will again need town meeting approval. So this article tonight is to establish the fund.
It is to establish the fund and to expend 200,000 of the 500 initial deposit. Any other questions? Am I right?
Darlene Hayes, 1/3 Road. I'm totally for the school getting a stabilization fund for this. My question is part 3 where it says not less than 25% of all the receipts. This whole host community agreement, the whole $500,000, shouldn't it all belong to the school and be at their will and when they need it and not have to come before town meeting? As these funds come in, don't they belong to the school?
Mr. Kamalo?
The motion, bullet number 3, specifically says dedicate 100%.
Why does it say not less than 25% of receipts right there? So why would they have to come before town meeting to get the money that belongs to them in the first place with the host community agreement? This money, the whole thing was based on the schools having this money.
If I may,
Yeah.
through the town moderator, the article was written the way it was, referencing 25%, because that's what the law prescribes.
Right, there's
However,
nowhere does it say 100%.
No. Again, it says so on the motion number 3.
The motion percentage 100 is because it's greater than 25, dedicates all the funds to the school.
It's contradictory, so the small one that was signed off on the 24th is different than the big one. The paperwork is different.
Is there any
It
question?
contradicts each other.
It's, again, I do not see through the town moderator. I can
Mr.
understand
Kamala.
why you feel that way. However, if you read carefully, it says not less than 25%. That's the article. And then the motion says, well, since it's not less than 25%, it is 100%.
Well, let me
I'm
have,
reading
hold on,
carefully.
hold
You gave out 2
hold
handouts tonight.
hold on.
Excuse me.
Town council will address this. Mr. Miyares.
Good evening. The statute that we are accepting in Part 2 of this motion allows the town to dedicate any identifiable revenue stream to go directly into a stabilization fund without a further town meeting vote. That statute says that you identify the revenue stream and you specify a percentage not less than 25%. So the warrant article says to establish a percentage not less than 25%. The motion that you are being asked to vote on sets that percentage at 100%, which is a percentage that is not less than 25%. So all of the money that comes in from Legacy Farms to address school population issues will, if this gets adopted, go directly into the stabilization fund.
So that still leaves me with two questions. One is, why did we get two different handouts that contradict each other? But the other part is, why does the school committee have to come before town meeting each other to ask for the funds? Shouldn't it just be there as they need it?
Well, I can address the first one. They don't contradict each other. When you write a warrant, you try to give, when it's possible, town meeting the maximum amount of discretion. So the warrant just says that the town meeting will be asked to set the percentage, not less than 25%. The motion that's before you sets the percentage at 100. As far as the second question, I'll leave that to the policymakers.
So the second question is why the school committee has to come back to town meeting for subsequent expenditures. Who can address that?
I think it's best expressed in that however these funds are expended, they must be addressing the impacts of the legacy farms enrollment. We all understand, can't be used for any type of school expenditure whatsoever. So this is to protect us all, that these are truly expended for expenditures that qualify as mitigation. And so there is a required amount of oversight to make sure that we stay within the legal requirements of what is considered mitigation for legacy farms.
Does that answer the question, Darlene?
As what it is.
On my left.
Hi, Mary Andruskevich at 46 Eastview Road. I'm curious about the host community agreements, not necessarily specific to legacy farms, but in general, when we think about what we've seen for growth and what might be in the future, do we have any statistics that tell us that the amount of what these builders are paying into, or what the legal agreements are for what they owe the town because of exceeding the amount of students they expect to come in? Do we have any kind of statistics that tell us that the amount we're identifying as their cost is fair? Because when I think about some of the increases we're talking about for the schools, especially if we have to build schools, do we need to revisit these host community agreements to maybe have these organizations for future ones? How do we know that they're appropriate going forward?
Let me cut it off at this point. I mean, that's okay as a question specific to legacy farms, and actually it's not even in the four corners of this article. That is a broad question. This article simply says we have received $500,000. However it was determined. And so what we're addressing is where that $500,000 should be placed, and whether $200,000 of that $500,000 should be spent in the next fiscal year for the benefit of the schools. The broad question about whether that's the right number, whether the agreement is fair, whether the agreement fully funds the obligation, is outside of the scope of this article.
Okay.
And better presented to the planning board in subsequent discussions.
No, and I said I can appreciate that. So I certainly want to be able to table that, or figure out how to table that kind of investigation going forward. But I guess I would turn my question into, do we know for what the miss was from legacy farms in terms of the number of students they're going to be sending to the schools? Do we have an idea how much it might cost us? Because as much as we don't know the ages necessarily, but do we have any statistics, or are there some kind of studies out there that tell us that per pupil kinds of costs are whether or not we're actually below water already in terms of accepting these funds? Or do we know, like I said, it might actually be sufficient?
Again, I think that's not a question for us right here, because it's not simply relating to $500,000. It relates to the residential tax revenue that comes in from legacy. The 500 is an increment above that, and it's clear to me that it just doesn't fit within the four corners of the discussion tonight. Again, I would address that either to the selectmen going forward, to the planning board, if another type of agreement like this comes forward.
Thank you.
Mary Jo LaFreniere, 18 Walcott Valley Drive. I just have a question. If we have a check from Legacy Farms right now for $500,000, and we're opening a stabilization fund in accordance to the host agreement, which I'm looking at right now, and it says a one-time payment of $500,000 right off the bat, why are we not depositing the whole 500 into this stabilization fund?
We are. We are both depositing the 500 and expending 200 in the next fiscal year. So what remains after the expenditure is the balance of 300 and any future funds that come under the host agreement into the stabilization fund.
Okay, I don't think that was clear where it says 200,000 and nowhere does it say 500,000 in the stabilization.
Dr. Kavanaugh, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I think I'll just summarize this very briefly. So $500,000 are already in the town's coffers. A 2/3 vote from you tonight will put that money into a stabilization fund. When you put that money in there, 200,000 of the 500,000 is already appropriated in the event that our enrollment issues rise to the level of needing additional personnel or something else to mitigate that enrollment. All subsequent revenue streams from Legacy Farms will also go into that stabilization fund. And I guess the short answer to how it comes out of there is it will have to come out by 2/3 vote of this town meeting, but it will be recommended by the school committee and endorsed by the town's financial officer.
Any other questions with respect to this article? Okay, if not, all those in favor of this article signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous and clearly a 2/3 majority. It's not less than 2/3, so therefore 100% is greater than 2/3, and that is not in conflict. Article 16, transfer to OPEB liability trust fund. Board of Selectmen, Ms. Wright.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Mr. Manning.
Article 16, transfer to other post-employment benefits liability trust fund. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is voting to transfer $400,000 for OPEB.
So we've been discussing this. Any further questions on this article? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous. Article 17, pay-as-you-go capital expenses. Ms. Wright for the Board of Selectmen.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital Improvements Committee.
Capital Improvements Committee recommends approval.
And then Mr. Manning.
Article 17, pay-as-you-go capital expenses. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is taking $1,358,121.56 from the general free cash to pay for various pay-as-you-go capital expenses, and also $6,312.44 from unspent capital appropriations to be used for the capital expenses. And I don't know if you want me to go through the different items, but or just people can ask questions on them.
Well, let's entertain questions. On my right.
Carol DeVere, 47 Chamberlain Street. In past years, the Appropriation Committee used to have a nice little cheat sheet that broke down all the expenses. Is that in here somewhere?
Pages 14 and 15.
Okay, thank you.
On my left.
Hello, Bill Simpson, 5 Constitution. Some of the prices on some of the replacement equipment, like that fire chief car and a few of the other things, seem higher than they could be appropriated for. It seems like a greater level of so-called shopping could be done on the prices of these items.
Mr. Manning, could you, or our CFO, could we speak to the issue of how the numbers are determined?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The budget process involved department heads identifying their requirements, going through a round of meetings with the town manager, going through several rounds of meetings with the Board of Selectmen, meeting with the Capital Improvements Committee, and meeting with the Appropriations Committee. There were tough sessions with a lot of questions. There were some revisions. There was talk about trade-in values. There was talk about alternative procurement methods that could be employed. And these were the dollar amounts that were settled upon. And if there's a specific question on a specific item, we have the relevant department heads here who could get up and talk about the complexity or requirement for some of these specific items. So I can say the process was robust, and we could answer questions about any specific item if you would like to hear about that.
Do you have a specific item or two that you want to question?
In this case, the cost of repairing the floor in the jail and the cost of the automobile for the police chief. And I know we're going to get another one in a couple more of these flips. It's going to be a hook and ladder truck, said to be valued at $1.5 million or so. Those figures seem like shopping around could find a significantly lower cost.
So
let's start with the repair of the jail cell floor.
So I have some knowledge on that if the city engineer is not available. The floor of the jail is a poured concrete slab, and it was coated with a cosmetic polymeric coating. Oh, here we go. You'll get the complete answer.
Please. Do you have a slide? Yes. Any slide?
Presentation. Don't know if they're paying attention up there.
Is there a particular?
Hey, Josh, can we have a presentation? Well, maybe as they're getting to this, the
wrong one.
The police station was built, it's 15 years ago now. There's an epoxy floor system for the jail cell. For this article...
Into the microphone.
Yeah, we did receive estimates and proposals from two different contractors for this work. And that's kind of what we based the estimate off, since it's such a round number. And that includes a contingency for, the estimate will be a year old, and to cover some of the bidding costs, since this is going to have to go out to bid with the cost being that much money. And we do, it was an item E, Josh, under this article.
Another one is the elevator controls.
There we go, I'm sorry.
That's $75,000. Is that the whole elevator, you know, the car and the winch and the stuff?
I'll
Or
get
is
to that
it-
question.
Oh, hold on, this is the...
Right after this, the presentation up there is just showing the existing floor in the police station. The poor condition it is in, and it has failed there's a state inspection for the cells, and it has failed. This is a very hard kind of epoxy flooring system. Those pieces can actually be broken up and actually be used to harm folks. So it really is imperative to replace the floors. And the prices, as I said, these are actual bid prices from contractors. It's a specialty kind of system that gets applied. It's as Tim was saying, it's an epoxy type of floor covering. And the state it's in, the floor area, it all has to be removed, and it has to be resanded and has to be reapplied.
Couldn't linoleum or something like that be put instead? I know that's
I'm not sure exactly, but I think this type of floor system is I don't know if it's required for jail cell system, but it has to be it has to be a safe system that can't be removed.
Well, this is the least one.
No.
Some of the other ones, like the elevator control.
Right, and
And the hook and ladder truck.
Well, can you
As for
speak to the elevator
As
controls?
for the elevator controls, no, it's not, it's all the controls for the elevator itself, but not the actual mechanical system for the elevator.
So-
And again, that is an estimated price from an elevator company, and it's actually been reduced 25%. With that 25% is going to be coming out of the facilities budget for emergency type repairs. So we're trying to be as diligent as possible on the cost.
And I guess it's too early to be talking about the hook and ladder.
Yes, it
truck.
is.
That's the fire.
Okay.
We're getting there. On my right?
Ken Dietz, 44 Alexander Road. I was wondering what the criteria was in determining, that these vehicles needed to be replaced, in particular the chief's car and the DPW trucks. How was it decided that they should be replaced?
Is that capital improvements, or is that our fire chief?
It's the respective departments.
Okay.
Good evening. So specific to the fire chief's car, I have a 10-year capital plan. It's our goal to utilize our cars about 8 years. We do assess them as we go and assess the plan as we go. So the car that's on that we're looking at tonight is 2011. It's in fairly good shape. The car that we're about to replace it with is actually a smaller vehicle. I have a Tahoe right now. This will be a Ford Explorer, and it has a I always say electric car, but let me make sure I say this correct. It is a hybrid. We do spend slightly more on the engine. That's some of the pieces we do. The quote for that is $39,000. That's a state bid list quote for just an admin Explorer. And then we add some, there's a tactical board, a command board that we haven't replaced in 3 cars. So it's about 20 years old, and it gets to it. This is kind of when we worked into the cycle. There's about $3,700 worth of technology that just allows me to have mobile data terminals, allows us to access our software and have it be cellular in connection. Hope I use the right term. And it comes with a radio that is, it's about $5,000 for me to have like a 3-band radio that interoperability. And then it's about $2,000 to have gear storage so that the gear doesn't stay out in the car and off gas, and it has to do with cancer and some protection. So those are the cost factors that run into a car.
Okay. So basically, you're replacing the car on age, and all of the rest of the stuff is understood.
Yes, in the capital planning, it's basically based on age.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Westerling.
Good evening through you, Mr. Moderator. My name is John Westerling. It's my privilege and honor to serve as your Director of Public Works. To the question of Public Works vehicles replacements, we also have a 10-year capital replacement plan where we evaluate all of our vehicles. We're looking at 2 vehicles under this particular article. One is 13 years old with 95,000 miles on it. It's received $27,000 worth of repairs. And the second is a 10-year-old dump truck with 110,000 miles on it, also receives $27,000 worth of repairs. And both of these are coming off the state bid list, which is a procurement process which doesn't require the town to go through the process. The state goes through the process and offers these vehicles to all communities. So we are getting a competitive price without going through the procurement process. But it does conform to procurement laws.
Okay, thank you.
On my left?
Hi, Nancy Emmerich, 8 Winter Street. To continue on with that, I don't think we heard about P replacing the police cruisers. Some detail about that would be helpful, as well as C, the feasibility study for the fire station. I'd like some further details about that.
If the respective chiefs would come forward.
The police cruisers are regular, we have a fleet and we keep up a regular maintenance of the vehicle. We track all the mileage of the cars and we try to keep the mileage down to 80,000, which is an accreditation standard. We're down like 5 cars that are above that mileage. We requested 3 last year, 3 the year before. We received 2 cars both years, and we're trying to catch up now. We did do some innovative work by using a gift to supplement our fleet, to keep our head above water, but we've also had quite a bit of maintenance fees this year because we're trying to keep the older cruisers up and on the road. But we do our best to schedule the cruises, not to use them 24/7, and it's just the 3 will get us at a good place, and it's usually a regular occurrence.
Thank you. Chief Slayman?
Thanks. So I thank you in advance for consideration tonight on the public safety feasibility study. The assessment would include existing building conditions, police and fire, and some potential existing buildings should we face them. It would identify deficiencies and impediments to department operations. It would provide programming and space needs analysis. It would generate building options for 2 fire stations, public safety, we don't know what the outcome is yet, and options of the probable cost for each. The options will include conceptual site and building plans and single floor plans. We will deliver a master plan for the stations plural, and locations. And finally, the group study will prepare and submit the final report and present the findings and options developed. Appreciate your consideration on this.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Are these backup stations, police stations and fire stations? Are we at max capacity with our existing facilities?
So this started about 2 years ago, just looking at the fire station specifically. We knew we were approaching capacity. It's 20 years old. It was designed to last 50 years. We will be at capacity this year on our current staffing design, so it just came quicker than what they designed for 20 years ago. In that study, we realized the other areas of town, we covered 28 square miles, so it is normal to think about different districts and responses to work on your response times at this point. That's just for fire. When we went through the exercise with Town Hall and the flood, we realized we may need to look at some redundancy in our systems, so we are studying police, fire, dispatch, emergency management, and trying to make sure that if we do a project with fire, that we actually look at everything. It's public safety, all naturally flows under one umbrella anyways. So we'll look at specifically we're looking at a second location and whether we need additional capacity for the police or dispatch for emergency management when we study the site.
And just one more. So could you use the Woodville station or fire station or not?
So in this first snapshot that we did, we actually ran our historic data. It turns out that the Woodville station is in a rural area, and where we're going to, looking forward, it most likely won't come on the radar as the second best location to respond from. And the current building has some major deficiencies. The site itself has some major deficiencies. I don't want to jump too far ahead because we are supposed to study it, but I can tell you that it's got some flaws that are very challenging.
On my right.
Frank Durso, 173 Saddle Hill Road. My questions are for H and N. I'll start with the boiler. What school is getting the new boiler? And what the wetland order of conditions, $40,000. What project was that related to? I know we have a lot of things we're covering, but I don't exactly remember that.
Dr. Kavanaugh?
So the boilers for the Hopkinton Middle School, And the Wetland Order of Conditions is something that has been unresolved for the past 20 years. And I think every year it just kind of gets put on the back burner. So we're hoping to get that resolved this year.
So to clarify through the moderator, this is for the Loop Road?
This is an order of conditions that was from the original build of the fields for when the high school and the Loop Road were
Okay,
done.
so which means that eventually when these orders are met, we'll be able to have Chapter 90 money for the Loop Road, which I fully endorse.
Well,
I hope.
this will not create the Loop Road to be a public road. That's different.
Well, that would save us a lot of tax money.
Okay,
going
but that's
forward.
not what this request is for. This is to recreate wetlands that were lost when the high school fields were created. But it is not to make the Loop Road a public road. I understand what you're asking, but that's not what the intent of this wetland.
Because we've been asking for a long time too, as well. But good luck. Thank you.
Am I right?
Joe Sredava, 21 Hearthstone Road. Just a question through the moderator for the schools on K, the data center replacement. Just looking for a little more clarity as to what the data center entails, if it's servers, networking.
Sat down too quickly.
I'm going to invite Mr. Ghoshtan, who is the Director of Technology. He'll be able to answer that for you.
Good evening, through Mr. Moderator. The data center replacement is the main data center at the high school. This is a joint town-school facility where all of the mission-critical systems are placed and housed, and it's about 9 years old and needs an update. That will be specifically for 3 servers in that facility.
Does that answer the question?
Through the moderator, so these servers are both for the town and for the schools?
It's roughly a 70-30% share.
Okay, thank you.
And we're building in redundancy with other servers at the fire and town side. So we can fail over from some of the servers there to the schools and vice versa from schools over to town when there's emergencies that happen, like water damage, et cetera, at some of the facilities.
And one final question through the moderator. What's the estimated life of this once it's replaced?
Through the moderator, the expected life is hopefully the same, roughly 8 to 9 years.
Okay, thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Oh, it seems like I've been in technology for many years.
Name and address.
Sorry. John Cardillo, 84 Winter. I've been in technology for many years. It seems like 8 to 9 years is a long time, and you can save a great deal of money by moving a lot of the technology and the support to the cloud. Is that feasible? And, in terms of replacing, you don't replace hardware. Somebody else replaces hardware. There's overhead costs, but moving to the cloud seems to be the way to go.
Through the moderator, correct, I would agree with that statement. Some of our key systems are hosted in the cloud, but there are other core systems that we do still choose to maintain internally. For example, print servers and other security systems, we keep those internally for specific reasons, but some of our core systems are still hosted in the cloud. So we do look to save costs by doing that.
Any other questions on this article? Okay, seeing none, we're ready for a vote. On Article 17, pay-as-you-go capital expenses. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nearly unanimous. Article 18, purchase of valve maintenance trailer system. Ms. Wright for the Selectmen.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital Improvements.
Capital Improvements recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 18, purchase of a valve maintenance trailer system. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is $65,000 for a a maintenance trailer system. It gives us the ability to be used during emergencies to close water gate valves, shut down water mains, and as a maintenance tool to exercise gate valves and keep them operational.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of Article 18 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous. Article 19, purchase of water department truck. Ms. Wright for the Board of Selectmen.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital improvements.
Capital improvements recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 19, purchase of a water department truck. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is $50,000 from the Water Enterprise Fund for the purchase of a truck.
Any questions? All those in favor of purchasing a water department truck signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nearly unanimous. And so voted. Article 20, purchase of bucket truck. Board of Selectmen, Ms. Wright.
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital improvements.
Recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 20, purchase of a bucket truck. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. This is $100,000 to purchase a bucket truck to be used by the DPW for tree maintenance and removal, as well as for building maintenance by the Facilities Department.
Any questions?
Moderator, Joe Regan, 37 Front Street. For some strange reason, I wholeheartedly support this. Oh yeah, you know that. Served as tree warden for 7 years back in the 90s, and it was a very frustrating thing to try to do stuff with the town. You would get a call and it was reactive, it was never proactive. Didn't have the money, we didn't have the personnel. And there was so much that just could not be done. And if you were around a year ago this March and you went through that snowstorm where you could not get down the roads, or even on a good day, if you're out walking or jogging or riding your bike, you find yourself getting more and more in the middle of the road. I hope that this purchase of a bucket will be the start to get a tree department going here in town. Buy the bucket, we will train some of the DPW personnel. Gradually, you can hire some people to have a dedicated tree department. You need one badly in this town, and I certainly hope that we will vote to purchase this bucket truck. Thank you.
With that ringing endorsement, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous and so voted. Article 21, purchase of multi-purpose municipal tractor. Ms. Wright for the Board of Selectmen.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
And capital improvements.
Capital improvements recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 21, purchase of a multi-purpose municipal tractor. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. This is $177,000 to be used for the purchase of a multi-purpose municipal tractor with a plow, blower, sander, and dump body to be used throughout the year, but primarily to be used for snow and ice removal on the growing sidewalk network.
On my left.
Hello. The size of this tractor at $177,000, is it 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, or is it more like, a 938 front end loader or something like that?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, it is sized so that it will fit on the sidewalks. It is approximately 4 feet wide and probably about 8 feet long, similar to the other two that we currently operate on the sidewalks.
So just to clarify, it's not as large as the ladder truck.
It is not.
No. But it seems a little small for $177,000.
Mr. Grossetti, would you please bring up the slide showing the vehicle?
That's what I thought.
So that's what we're looking at.
For that much?
For that much. And it needs to be of a size that isn't too large to fit on the sidewalks, squeeze between utility poles and walls, but still do an effective job at clearing the snow.
Okay. Okay.
On my right.
Dave Paul, 7 Meadowland Drive. I think the picture just answered my question. I was going to ask if it's a thrower versus a plower, because the thrower is much better to use. And I guess I'll change my question and say the existing two, are they also throwers?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, they can both push and throw, depending upon how much snow, the weight of the snow.
Just a follow-up comment in general. I just wanted to compliment the town boards and department heads. I think we've thrown a lot of questions at them, and they're well prepared with pictures and descriptions, and it's proof that they're not just spending our money carelessly.
On their behalf, we thank you. On my left.
Francis DeYoung, 3 Doyle Lane. John, is this incremental to the 2 existing blowers that you mentioned previously?
Through the moderator, yes, it is.
And just what's the rationale for adding a third? Have we been neglecting because we don't have the ability or capacity, or is this kind of used to be a long-term replacement for one of the other 2?
Through the moderator, we currently remove snow from a network of approximately 17 miles of sidewalk. It takes roughly 8 to 16 hours with the 2 vehicles that we have. And we have to take operators that have been out working for hours or perhaps days working on the roads. So we take them out and we put them in these 2 vehicles. It takes 8 to 16 hours. With a third vehicle, we'll be able to clear the snow and provide safe travel on the sidewalks in a much more efficient and quick manner.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Article 21 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Clearly a 2/3 majority, and so voted. Article 22, Sewer Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan Update. Ms. Wright?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital Improvements.
Capital Improvements recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning?
Article 22, Sewer Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan Update. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is $170,000 from the Sewer Enterprise Fund borrowing to update the town's 2004 Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan to reassess areas in town of critical need for sewer service.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it's unanimous, clearly a 2/3 majority. Remember that we agreed at the outset to move Article 53 to follow Article 22 since they were related. So Article 53 is now on the floor. And I will call on, is it Maureen Belger?
Yes, sir.
To make a motion.
All right. Maureen Belger, 14 Colella Farm Road, and we move that the town vote to take no action on Article 53.
Okay, so that you understand, that means that no action means that essentially this is effectively being withdrawn.
Correct.
Is there any discussion with respect to this article? Okay. All those in favor of taking no action on this article signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and so no action will be taken. Now we return to Article 23. Sidewalk Master Plan Phase 2. Ms. Wright.
The Board of Selectmen recommends approval.
Capital Improvements.
Capital Improvements recommends approval.
And Mr. Manning.
Article 23, Sidewalk Master Plan Phase 2. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. This is $1,060,000 from general fund borrowing, design and construction of the second phase of the 5-year sidewalk plan on West Main Street and Wood Street. The appropriation represent a portion of Phase 2 of the sidewalk plan outlined in the town master plan.
Questions on my left?
Tom Terry, 17 Maple Street. I had a discussion regarding this issue with Board Chairman John Westerling, and I had a few questions. and I was hoping to get them either answered through you or by him. I had talked with him about this proposal is for $100,000 to do a sidewalk on Wood Street over by the highway barn. It's also $960,000 to do a sidewalk that's going to go from Lumber Street to Downey Street.
Before you go further, do we have a picture of the areas in question? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Terry.
That's more or less what I'm getting to also. So I called John and I asked him about the $960,000 appropriation. I'm 100% in favor of the $100,000 for the sidewalk over at the highway barn. And my first question was, do you have a set of plans I could review, John? And he said, no, we don't have any plans. We didn't do it that way. I said, well, how did the selectmen vote on it if they didn't know what they were voting on? How did the appropriations committee vote on it if they didn't know the vote? He said, that's the procedure we do. And in that money is some money set aside for getting a bid so that then we can come back and we can tell you exactly how we got to $960,000. And the only way I found out how they got to the $960,000 was there was a ballpark figure. Looking at the history of building sidewalks, it seemed about a good number to throw on a piece of paper. And I don't really understand how it's such an issue, not so much money. It's a safety issue because that sidewalk is going to go from basically Cumberland Farms all the way to Downey Street. And eventually, part of the plan was to continue the sidewalk down Downey Street. When I heard that, I said, oh my God, Downey Street, you can't get two cars to pass down there. You're going to put a sidewalk there. So I walked down the street one Sunday, a week ago Sunday. I stopped at Cumberland's. I went across a giant pond on my left, the Conservation Commission. I asked if they'd been consulted. He hasn't been consulted. He doesn't know what's going on there. I kept walking across 4 off and on ramps, and one of them is very treacherous. You can't see the cars coming down. If you're coming from Marlboro and you're coming off the second ramp, you're all of a sudden in the pathway with your walking. And then I looked at the bridge, and the bridge has the abutment on the front of it is shaped at a 45-degree angle, comes out onto the road. So you're going to have to build a bridge that's probably going to be 5 or 6 feet above the road. And that bridge is going to be about 200 feet long. It's going to have, obviously, an abutment wall and then a screen. And that's going to be very, very expensive. 495 has 2 lanes going over, as we all know, and when they plow snow in the winter, I don't know if you've ever had your car hit, when cars go over there, they throw that snow across and over the top of 495. It lands on West Main Street. There's no screens. Some of the roads you'll see around the country have screens. This one doesn't have a screen on either side of the bridge. So there's going to need to be a screen there. I'm just wondering, without a set of plans, not asking the state or the federal government if there's any possibility of some kind of a cooperation, that they could maybe either do this or pay for half of it or pay for a percentage of it. How can we vote for $960,000, $40,000 shy of $1 million, on a sidewalk that's going down to by the Price Chopper, following on down to Downey Street, and just stopping there? And we don't know about the safety of the kids. We don't know where they cross the off and on ramps. Are there going to be buttons with lights? I asked John. He said no, there wouldn't be any signals like that. There would just be some signs. Well, I'm worried about the safety of the people here, and I think we ought to table this until the DPW can do some research on it, come back next year, and we can do it next year. It's part of a program, those sidewalks. So consequently, there's other speakers. I want to make an amendment, but I want to make sure everybody's heard. Mr. Moderator, should I, if I do the amendment, it's going to probably stop debate, right?
Do you have an amendment that you've written out at this point? Or?
Yes. The town council has reviewed it, and Josh has it up back. What I'm basically trying to do is cut out the $960,000 expenditure and just do the sidewalk for the $100,000 this year.
So, Josh, do you have we seen the specific amendment?
Excuse me. Tom, I know this is out of order, but I do have a question on the Wood Street.
No, Mr. Terry is making an amendment. I just want to...
I'm asking if Mr. Terry would mind waiting till I say what I'm going to say and then make the amendment. Through you, Mr. Moderator. Jackie Potenzoni, 12 Wood Street.
I would prefer to see the amendment, and then as we have discussion on the amendment, if you want to make a comment or a suggestion, let's do it in that fashion. So, do we have the amendment up, Josh?
Yes. Josh is going to put an amendment up, but he's going to change the $1,060,000 to $100,000, which will take care of just Wood Street. And this will automatically eliminate the West Main Street part of the job.
So your amendment would substitute for $1,060,000, $100,000,
and cross out West Main.
And cross out West Main, and so it would relate strictly to Wood Street.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment? Okay. So there has been an amendment, which has been seconded. Is there discussion on the amendment? On my right. No, on my left.
Joe Markey, 39 Ash Street. I'm uncomfortable voting on an amendment without having heard from DPW themselves on this article.
Mr. Westerling, would you like to comment?
Through you, Mr. Moderator. One of the things that I love about working for this community is the challenges that I'm faced with. A number of years ago, town meeting voted $1.5 million for the design and construction of sidewalks on 4 different roads in town. And we accomplished that, and we have the money up front so that we can design it and then put it out to bid, and then build the sidewalks as town meeting wishes. These 2 locations were selected by a survey that was done by the planning board, which looked at where the community wanted to see sidewalks, and then it was prioritized by the planning board and further refined through the budget process. So what we've got here is an estimate. We looked at this on a preliminary basis with the engineers, and I want to thank Mr. Terry for pointing out all the challenges that are faced when you're looking to build a sidewalk from essentially Lumber Street to Downey Street. There's 495. If any of you have been along in Milford, where the bike trail goes under 495, you'll see how that can be accomplished. So there are challenges, but there are also workarounds and design configurations.
Again, comments on my right. Is there a comment relating to the amendment?
Yes, Frank Durso, 173 Saddle Hill Road. I'm against the amendment. I think that I love Mr. Terry. I love your voice. I love your presence. But as a member of the planning board, we've had discussions going way back to Mr. Wisemantle's time. And this is a plan that's coming together. I think it's very expensive, but there are a lot of challenges going under a federal highway. Milford's done it by tunneling, by crossing with yellow lights. I would assume for this price tag there'd be yellow lights to warn people that people are crossing. Otherwise, I'm in full support of it, and I would be against making this amendment at this point.
On my left.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Hyman, 12 Hidden Brick Road. I understand that the article listed 4 potential sidewalks and only 2 were moved in the motion document. So before we can speak to removing one, I think I'd like some understanding of why the other 2 were not chosen.
Mr. Westerling, were there 4 or were there simply 2?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, there were 4. Through the budget deliberative process, it was reduced down to 2.
And again, Mr. Moderator, I understand there was some robust discussion amongst the selectmen on the choice of the final 2. If we're proposing to pull $1 million out of the budget to not do West Main, it would seem there's an opportunity to potentially do one or both of the others. So I'd like some understanding of that before we vote on the motion to remove the West Main.
May I speak to that?
Ms. Wright.
The 4 locations were the West Main Street, as has been discussed, for $960,000. The Wood Street, which was $100,000. That is, I believe, Proctor down to the DPW. There is the Hayden Rose Street on the side, on the east side. There is already sidewalk on the west side, but this would put sidewalk on the east side, I believe, going down to Chestnut. Is that correct? And then finally, a small amount of sidewalk on Wild Road, which was for $40,000. In an attempt to keep our budgets down, this would have been a total of about $1.5 million. The Board of Selectmen discussed these alternatives, felt there already is sidewalk on Hayden Row, although not on both sides. We decided that Wild Road is a very minor road. It already has partial sidewalk, and we felt that the funds should be spent in the areas that were most needy. In particular, that west end of town has no connectivity whatsoever for the lake area to get over to Price Chopper or up to the shopping area and vice versa. We have focused much of our efforts on the downtown area and the area around the schools, which are very deserving, but we felt this was both a dangerous area and a deserving area that needed equal attention. We'd like to spend $1.5 million, but we felt it was prudent to try to reduce these expenses this year in light of our budget and our desire to keep that tax impact within the 2.5, which we have accomplished.
On my right.
Darlene Hayes, 1/3 Road. I'm actually speaking against the amendment. I'd almost want to see it reversed. I actually live in that lake neighborhood and had a son about 6 years ago clipped by a car turning right from Downey Street onto West Main Street. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt that bad. A bike was totaled. But we are very much, there is a sidewalk that goes up South Street on one side, but if you're in the heart of a very congested neighborhood, turning down Downey Street, the kids are trying to get to their friends on West Elm, things like that, they can't get there. They can get up to the light and cross over where it's safer, but they want to go down there because it's quicker, and then if there was a sidewalk there, it'd be safer. But, you know, there's a lot of kids that are riding their bikes, whipping up and down there, and, you know, walking and joggers every single day. We are a very congested neighborhood that really could use this.
On my left.
Brian Douglas, 14 Greenwood Road. In the grand, so I think the previous speaker answered one of my questions with regard to the rationale behind what was driving this project, because I think in the grand scheme of things, of all the things that DPW could be doing, $1 million on sidewalks, I'm curious to know where this would rank in terms of the priority of other things that we could spend the $1 million on, just for overall either DPW projects, town safety projects. Where does this rank from a priority perspective?
Is that best answered by you, John, or by capital improvements?
I'll take a stab at it, Mr. Moderator.
All right, go ahead.
Thankfully, town meeting tonight voted on all of our other priorities this year.
This is the remaining priority.
Okay, so was this motion in order of priority? Because this is what, number 23, I think. So is this basically the lowest priority of the other motions that were put forth tonight?
Through the moderator, I had no way of ordering or selecting which ones came up first.
Okay, thank you.
On my right.
Hi, I'm Michael Holmes. I live at 5 Holt Street. I have mobility issues, and I have called in 3 almost accidents, leaving Price Chopper, going down the hill. You do understand, I mean, I think you understand, or people who use that exit certainly understand that people are not attentive at high volume traffic. They're not. They're simply not. And literally, there were 2 cars, and there are distracted drivers at all times. And so these, the converging lanes, we have several things going on right there. We have we have 2 right-hand turn lanes. Then we have an exit that's supposed to merge into, and you're not supposed to make a left, but they always want to merge right in front of Cumbies. They come dashing down and merge ahead. So that's fine. I don't care. I'm old. I can afford 5 minutes. But you can't afford to have people hit there. And I do think that that's what it's going to lead to. There's simply not enough space in the cant of the hill, and the desire of kids, young people driving home who can't spend, they come up behind me. Now, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen.
So
And I think the town will be sued because of it.
Can you, well, just clarify then, are you in favor of,
What do you think? I'm dramatically opposed to this. I'm not opposed to sidewalks. I really, truly am not. I love sidewalks. This is a disaster. I really do believe that this, having seen almost disasters, knowing how kids drive, and adults anxious to be home, I vehemently oppose it.
just to clarify, you support the motion to remove West Main Street sidewalks? Okay. On my left.
Mr. Moderator, Mary Arnott, 51 Teresa Road. I understood that the state was looking at reconfiguring the on-off ramps at I-45 and West Main, rather, and how would that impact these sidewalks and the projects? How would they be coordinated?
Mr. Westerling, do we have any understanding of what the state might be considering?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, the only realignment of ramps that we're aware of is at the intersections of 495 and the Mass Pike and 495 and Route 9. I'm not aware, and the town manager's not aware, of any proposed realignments here on West Main Street.
Okay. I just asked that be looked into because I thought I read that somewhere, and I was wondering how they were going to do that and impact West Main. Thank you.
On my right? Go ahead.
Dave Paul for the Planning Board. We do have that on an agenda coming up, the interchange of 495 and the Mass Pike.
What does that mean? When you say we have that on the agenda, that's...
The Planning Board.
But as it relates to state action, or?
I think she just had a question about upcoming projects. If I misspoke, that's fine.
Okay. On my left?
Hello. I'm going to make it simple. If you build this $1 million walkway, it'll save a life, maybe 2 or 3. If you don't, there'll be a casualty at that point of roadway. Thank you.
On my right?
Hi, I just wanted to, Stacia Frederick Crozy, 7 Lilac Court. I just wanted to speak against the amendment. I don't know if we can move forward without the amendment or what the next step is, but I do think it is very important that we have sidewalks where 495 is. We have a whole section of town that needs to be connected to the other half of town. I have a kid who actually was looking at a job at Price Chopper. He doesn't drive. He was like, "Can I ride my bike?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. That is not a safe area to ride your bike. There is not a sidewalk there." We need to continue to address this.
And on my left?
Samantha Dings, 3 Wordy Circle. I move to call the question.
Okay. So that the question has been called with respect to ending debate on the amendment to the main motion. So the amendment that we're voting on would limit the expenditure to $100,000 and specifically for sidewalks on Wood Street as had been illustrated. Does everyone understand what we're voting on? So those in favor of the amendment to limit sidewalks and the cost, what's the point of order? Yeah, all right. All those in favor of calling the question? Any opposed? All right. The question has been called, so we've ended debate. We're now going to vote on the amended motion. Do you understand the amended motion? All right. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, it's clear majority opposed. So now we return to the motion as it was presented. All right. Can't hear you. Is there any further discussion associated with the main motion?
Can I ask a question on Wood Street now?
We're back to the main
Okay,
motion, so yes.
Thank you. I am just asking why we're only going to repair the sidewalks from Jackie Potenzoni, 12 Wood Street, I'm sorry, from Proctor to Walker Street. I don't know if you've walked down Wood Street from the top of the hill where I live, but in front of my house, there was a sidewalk repair a few years ago when they did repair on the street. And in front of my house, the sidewalk's been repaired. As you go down to 20, 24, 26, 28 Wood Street, down to Elm Street, the sidewalks are falling apart. So I don't understand how the town can justify spending $100,000 and not starting at the top of the hill where the sidewalks are already broken, crumbled, and falling apart, and just replacing a section and having gaps in the sidewalk. And I'd like clarification on that.
Mr. Westerling.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, just to be clear, this is for construction of new sidewalks?
That's not what the article says. It says to authorize the town to approve, for repair, rehabilitation, renovation, construction, and reconstruction
Through you, Mr.
along West
Okay.
Main and Wood Street.
All right, let's allow Mr. Westerling to answer.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, that's broad language to cover...
Very broad.
Please, don't interrupt.
To cover the design and construction of new sidewalks, in this case on Wood Street from Proctor, where we ended sidewalk construction with our last phase, to join to the sidewalk that was built in front of the DPW garage, continue along the DPW garage, which we don't need to touch, and extend that to Walker Street. So this is for construction of new sidewalks. Earlier, the town meeting approved $54,000 in the DPW's operating budget, which is an annual appropriation that we use to repair sidewalks. So with the comments that I've heard this evening, we will certainly look at repairing sidewalks on Wood Street and how those fit into the priority of the other sidewalks.
And my next question, is there an easement required in front of my house for this sidewalk repair by any chance? I'd like transparency.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, if there are existing sidewalks, there is no easement required.
Thank you.
On my left.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. Quite a few of the people around me think that the vote was unclear. Would you mind reconsidering your vote and having a standing vote? I know it would take a lot of knee bending, but I'm pleading.
All right. I mean, while it didn't seem unclear to me, I suppose we could use some exercise at this point. And so we'll go back to a standing count with respect to the motion, the amended motion, which was to limit the expenditure to $100,000 and the work on Wood Street. All those in favor of limiting construction to Wood Street and limiting the budget to $100,000, please stand. Raise your green cards. Eight on the stage.
Mr. Moderator, center front 5.
Stage center front 5.
Right rear, 19.
Just to clarify, I'm doing, is that stage right or auditorium right? Stage right is over here. That's stage left. Was that 19? Does anybody understand what?
Left front, 6.
Left front, 6.
Back right, 34.
Back right, 34. Do we have left rear and center rear?
Center rear, 32.
Did we have back left? No, I have, yeah. Let's go over these numbers again. I had stage 8. Stage left rear was how many? Yes. Stage left front. So this side.
6.
Okay. Stage center rear. 32. Stage center front 5. Stage right rear 34. Stage right front 19. Correct? Okay. So there is no, all right. So stage right was 34, encompassing the whole right side? Yes. Okay. All those opposed, stand and raise your green cards. Stage is 6 opposed.
Center rear, 12.
Center rear 12.
Right side 30.
30 on the right, okay.
Center front, 32.
Center front 32.
Front left, 21.
21 left front.
Left in the back, 26.
26. Okay, that motion did fail, 127 to 104. Okay, so we're back to consideration of the original motion. Is there any further discussion? Am I right?
Russ Grieve, 24 Nicholas Road. In the process of construction on this West Main Street section, if there's a cost overrun, how will that be handled? Will all the projects stop, or will we be coming back to town meeting to cover that?
Through the moderator, as with any project, if the estimates for construction come in greater than the appropriation, we'll have to come back and seek additional funding.
Mr. Moderator, does that mean there will be no work commenced without
a $960,000 cost for the West Main Street section?
Well, let's clarify this first. There's $1,060,000 that would be appropriated.
Okay.
Can you Mr. Westerling, can you clarify if, let's say the bids come in at $1,000,001, how would you proceed at that point? How would the town proceed at that point?
Through the moderator, we would look to see if we can't make minor changes to the design and therefore the construction to be able to come in under the appropriation.
And failing that, would you choose one project or another?
Through the moderator, we're going to have to look at the two projects in total. Again, as was pointed out earlier, we don't currently have a specific design, so we'll have to look at the two projects and determine if we want to bid those separately or bid those as a whole.
Does that clarify it for you?
I think so. However, I'm just not clear. Once we get into, you get your foot in the pond, and then pretty soon, oh, we're only 1/3, and we got a bid for whatever the 106, but we have cost overruns now. So you'll be coming back to town meeting for those cost overruns, if they so happen.
Through the moderator, again, as with any capital project that is appropriated funds, if we don't have the necessary funds, we'll have to come back to town meeting and seek either clarification of the sidewalk, the location, or seek additional funding.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
On my left?
Dan Terry, 9 John Matthew Road. It seems as though the primary benefit for the West Main Street portion, based on the comments that I've heard tonight, is for bicycles. And I wonder if, and maybe this is a question for public safety, but is the design for this, and are we going to encourage bicycle traffic on these sidewalks? My understanding for bicycles is that they're to use roadways. So this isn't necessarily an adequate solution, and should we be looking at a solution for bicycles along this area?
Through the moderator, the comment is absolutely spot on. Sidewalks are not built for bicycles, but if we build the sidewalk and there are bicyclists that want to get from one end to the other, they can dismount their bicycles and walk them on the sidewalks safely.
Sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
Through the moderator, again, this was a planning board survey for where we wish to build sidewalks in town for pedestrian access.
On my right.
Darlene Hayes, 1/3 Road. Mr. Westling, is there any chance that this could be extended beyond Downing Street all the way to School Street?
Through the moderator, I think that there are some overarching challenges there. I said that I love the challenges of the job, but with the two causeways that cross over Lake Maspinock, I don't know that there's adequate width in there to put in a 5.5-foot wide sidewalk at this point.
On my left.
Francis DeYoung, 3 Doyle Lane. Just to address the previous comment, and being a member of the planning board, although speaking as a member of the public, and as a runner in town, it was developed for walkers and people that want to commute. There was the development over off of Lumber Street, and the thought was people could walk over to Price Chopper and do those things. And as a member of the running club, to be able to kind of cross that area without the impediment to some degree of the traffic on 495, and to be able to get over to the west side of town was another draw and another reason for developing these sidewalks for pedestrians. Thank you.
On my right.
Carol DeVere, 47 Chamberlain Street. I fully support being able to get from one side of 495 to the other in a safe manner. What concerns me is the description by Mr. Terry does not indicate to me that it's going to be particularly safe if you just have to kind of cross those ramps. So my question is, during the design process, is there going to be an opportunity for the public to give input to the design before construction starts and monies are expended?
Through the moderator, my expectation is that yes, we would hold a public informational meeting and look at those things. We'll also have to work very closely with Mass DOT because this is their right of way and potentially impacts their traffic flow, so they're also going to weigh in on the design. However, we've seen, again, safely, just locally in Milford, where the rail trail crosses 4 ramps and crosses under Route 495, how it can be accomplished in a safe manner.
Thank you.
On my left.
Brian Douglas, Greenwood Road. So it sounds to me as if we don't actually have a design or a plan yet. We've just, we basically guesstimated the $1.6 million. Would that be an accurate statement?
Through the moderator, we looked at this with our design engineers, VHB, who designed the other sections of town that we built sidewalks for the $1.5 million. And the estimate was based off of their review of it and the average cost of construction and looking at some of the other challenges that we face going through that area.
Would we be using our own staff, if you will, for the design or for the design and construction, or would we be outsourcing this to a third-party general contractor?
Through the moderator, we would be going through a third-party contractor.
So would it make sense to perhaps get bids on designs and then come back with designs and figures behind them to vote on those, as opposed to voting on $1,060,000 beforehand? Because frankly, I don't know what I'm getting for that $1.6 million other than a sidewalk, but I don't know with any great detail any additional safety measures that have been taken or any potential challenges that we might incur in building that. I mean, a million's, I mean, when you put 2 commas on it, it gets my attention.
Absolutely. Through the moderator, if we get into the design, and again, the way that we did the last phase of sidewalks, the $1.5 million, was to get all the money up front, to appropriate the funds at once for both design and construction. So that's what the intent was with the approach here. If we get into the design and we find that there are overarching elements, we would not borrow the $960,000 in this case for West Main Street and look at our options.
Thank you.
On my right.
Ken Dietz, 44 Alexander Road. Regards to the Milford bikeways and all of the crossings they have on 85 and other places, they have crosswalk lights. Can you put crosswalk lights as part of the crossings of the 495 exits?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, my view of those areas in my riding my bicycle there are not flashing lights at the interchange of Route 495. The flashing lights are further to the north on Route 85.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying where this West Main sidewalk is going, it's going to cross 2 ramps on one side and 2 ramps on the other side, and I'm saying, are you going to consider putting crosswalk lights at those interchanges? So that's 495 and West Main.
Yet through the moderator, we will work very closely with Mass DOT, and we will implement as many safety measures as we can that Mass DOT will allow us without impeding their traffic flow of on-ramps and off-ramps.
All right, because it is extremely dangerous there. Thank you.
On my left.
John Cardillo, 84 Winter. I think Milford and Hopkinton are really quite different. And when you're taking the exit from Hopkinton down to Milford, it's a little bit of a curve, and then it's pretty much of a straightaway, and you can see fairly far in front of you. When you're coming off all those turns at getting on and getting off here in Hopkinton, those are pretty tight curls, and I've seen cars come through there. There's yield signs, but there's got to be either a stop sign or some kind of it's going to force people to look in front of them. I can just see that, maybe it'll appear to be safer, but in the long run, I think it's going to create more problems. And I think community involvement and making everyone aware that this might indeed happen and allow for public comment, I think, is critical.
On my right.
Michael and Holmes, 5 Holt Street. And I love sidewalks. I would love, if I could, to walk to Price Chopper. I don't feel it's safe, certainly not now, and I wouldn't feel it was safe without crossing lights, respected crossing lights, with ticketing being commenced immediately. How far up the hill also does the sidewalk go?
Sorry,
If it's knitting places together, does it get to Angels? Where does it go?
through the moderator, the way that the article is written, it goes from Lumber Street to Downey Street.
Ah,
So it doesn't go to Angels.
so it
Correct.
doesn't, how many streets does it cross? There are three things on 495.
So it
All
would-
three of the 495 and South Street. You've got four positions in which to be needing, let's not say in which to be hit, let's say in which to be needing crosslights. I've crossed where there's a walkway painted from Golden Spoon to get to a hair appointment. I was almost hit. I thought, well, that isn't safe. Because it's just not safe without, I urge you to consider more public input. That's it, thank you.
On my left.
Michelle Murdoch, 53 School Street. I move the question.
All right. Motion has been made to call the question. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of ending debate signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay. We're going to take a standing vote on this because it requires a 2/3 majority. If I'm correct. So we're voting on the main motion, which is to expend $1,060,000 on sidewalks that would both be on the south side of West Main as well as on Wood Street. All those in favor, please rise and hold your green cards up. Seven on the stage.
Left front 17.
Left front 17.
Right side 30.
Right side 30.
Mr. Moderator, center front 27.
Center front 27.
Mr. Moderator, center rear 14.
Center rear 14.
Left rear 29.
Left rear 29. Okay. All those opposed, stand and hold your green cards. Seven on the stage.
Mr. Moderator, center front 7.
Center front 7.
Right side 35.
Right side 35.
Left rear 12.
Left rear 12.
Center rear 30.
Center rear 30.
Left front 12.
Left front 12. So we have 124 to 103. So it's 124 in favor, 103 opposed, and so it does not reach the 2/3 majority, and so thus fails. Article 24, school bus parking lot. Capital Improvements Committee.
Capital Improvement Committee recommends approval.
And Appropriations, Mr. Manning.
Article 24, school bus parking lot. We move the motion as written in the warrant articles and motions document. Essentially, this is an extra $300,000 from a general fund borrowing. This project will include additional funds needed for the implementation of a master plan that will better accommodate parking, traffic circulation, parent drop-off pickup, and bus movement on the campus, mainly at Hopkinton High School. This appropriation will supplement funds that were previously appropriated, $400,000 in fiscal year 2019.
Does the school committee wish to make any comments on this? Not, I mean, it's not necessary, but.
So in a general sense, in 2018 Maytown meeting, we had secured the original appropriation of $400,000 prior to meeting all our obligations and permitting process through the town. Once we got through all those permitting processes, it required engineering changes to our original design. That engineering changes increased the cost of the parking lot by the $300,000. Some of the significant things were basically we needed to raise the entire elevation of the parking lot, so that required additional material. There was additional stormwater collection and treatment devices, landscaping, guardrail and fencing due to that elevation increase, additional lighting requirements, additional excavation, and an asphalt adjustment as a year of market change.
Are there any questions?
Gary Trendle, 31 Chamberlain Street. Not so much a question, but I just want to speak against this. I was against it before, and the fact that we're almost doubling the price of it, I'm against it now. While I appreciate the benefits of parking our buses in town, I think this lot is just too small. There's snow removal, storage issues. We're parking cars of the bus drivers there as well as the buses themselves. And I think that when we double the price, I'd really question whether it's still worth the potential savings and if there's not a potentially better site to park our buses in town.
On my right.
Hi, Deborah Feinberg, 12 Prestwick Drive. I, too, echo Gary's response about how environmentally, I don't feel that the congestion and the smog that the buses are going to create is going to be a wholesome environment for the kids. But my second point is, if we're planning to do an expansion in the rear, and there's already plumbing and facilities to do that, is it really an auspicious idea to put an expensive parking lot?
Mr. Moderator, I do have a presentation, depending on the questions, was whether I would show that. So Josh, I would ask you if you could pull that up, please. So we can just go to the next slide, please, Josh. So these are the costs that I just ran through quickly in terms of the additional costs of where we are to get to this additional appropriation. And just to take you through the history in the next slide, In 2017, we embarked really on looking at the campus as a whole and looking at a master plan. Some of the things that we're looking at to evaluate were parking, location of and size of student parking, staff parking, visitor parking, and determining space for bus parking. At the time here is for 28 buses. I will tell you in 2020 we will have 29 buses. And in 2021, most likely, we will have 30 buses. The next slide, we also were looking at the safety, and that is looking at all users of the campus to be evaluated as it relates to lighting, security, both with gates and cameras, signage, and the distance from the buildings to the fields, and a potential of a maintenance storage facility. So those were all of the things that we were looking at in terms of looking at this full campus plan. One of the things that came out in this study was the first phase was to look for a bus parking lot. So the current conditions, currently there is separation of bus and vehicle traffic at all of our schools except the middle school and the high school. Marathon, Elmwood, and Hopkins all have parent and vehicle traffic separated from where the buses are. So at the middle school and high school, you can see some of the statistics that we put forward, but basically each day there's an average of 1,700 middle school and high school students and over 160 vehicles together. We're kind of messed up on the slides, Josh. One more. So there's over 1,700 students and 160 vehicles all in the same place for dismissal. Next slide. So the goal of this school bus lot is not just to park the vehicles in town. It is that separation of the bus and vehicle traffic. And this is defined as best practices. It's the safety of the students, and it is also maintaining our emergency access to the buildings around the campus. Next slide. So traffic flow, best practice, traffic engineers, when they're designing buildings, they are separating all different modes of traffic, whether it is vehicle, walkers, bicyclists, parent cars, student cars, bus traffic. So you'll see in the design of the Marathon building as an example, there is that separation. The middle school, high school right now is currently our only building that we do not have that separation of all those different modes of transportation. These are just a couple of quotes that talks about that as being best practice. And this next slide is also, this study actually shows kind of a picture of what we have, where it just talks about that physical separation. It's basically, it's a design issue. So it's something that really needs to be addressed. So the next slide. So when we were looking at where we could do this, we went through all different options around the campus. So what we did is looked at all different places where we could stage the buses for the dismissal and the drop-off and try to create some type of separation. So in these next couple slides, you'll see all the places where we looked at, and the red X's show you all of our conflict points, whether it is blocking emergency access, blocking existing parking, or blocking traffic as we're going through dismissal. This shows an alternative of having it in the front. The next slide shows an alternative of using the back, which basically takes up our emergency access all through the backside. The next slide brings them up through the middle, again taking up all of your emergency access roads, and you can still see more conflict points.
And if I just something that you can look at in that slide right there. When you look at the two wings off the back of the high school, the shorter of the two is where those 6 classrooms would go. So there will not be interference between adding those classrooms and the bus parking lot, just to clarify.
Okay, next slide, Josh. And this was one other options that we looked at. So we really did look all around the campus for the best area to be able to create this new drop-off and pickup procedures with the buses. And the next slide. And where we landed was out on the field, which is behind the high school. It keeps open our emergency access. It keeps open all access to any parking, any live traffic flow, and it became the best area to have those buses parked, staged for drop-off and pickup and dismissal. So the next slide, basically, to your point, we're talking about enrollment and space issues, and you are correct. We have been looking at the high school buildings. So this next slide, this is what Dr. Kavanaugh was just speaking to. Those green squares show where we could put additions or portable classrooms if needed. And you can see it does not get down into that emergency access road. It does not block where the buses would be coming in and out, and it does not go out and infringe onto that field, which would become the parking lot. So the next piece that we looked at was, what else does this do for us? You know, not only is this separating all the modes of transportation and keeping our students safe, but it also improves the traffic flow around the whole campus. It has the potential to increase parking in the future, and it also has a financial impact for the town. So this next slide. If we were to lose what is now the staging for the buses, and that becomes parking, we would be able to add 92 additional parking spaces. And as you can hear from all the growth, you know, these spaces would be quickly used up. It would give us an ability to pull some of our students closer, reconfigure where staff and students are parking, getting back again to what we were talking about, proximity of parking and to the buildings. Excuse me. This next slide shows a different traffic pattern, again utilizing that bus parking lot, but we would also be able to add 55 additional spaces. And currently on the campus right now, there are 481 existing spaces. And the last slide talks to the financial impact. We were able to negotiate with the school bus contractor that if we were able to bring the buses into town, they would be willing to give us a reduction in our contract of $50,000. And of course, having the buses housed in the town would bring in financial impact to the town of Hopkinton in the way of excise tax. So that gives you the financial impact as well.
On my right.
Frank Durso, 173 Saddle Hill Road. I don't think you can find a bigger fan of this idea. I've been working on this since I've been on the Green Committee, 2009. We met with your predecessor's predecessor. I agree with my colleague on the planning board. I don't see why you need another $300,000 or $400,000. I don't see why this project couldn't be met with the money you've got last year. I don't see how these numbers add up to, we were looking at $150,000 savings per year just based on gas. Is the school district paying for gas separately, or does the contract cover all the gas that they'll be saving? Because you're giving up $50,000 right there based on 25 buses.
So the bus contract right now does not have a fuel clause. So when we had a fuel clause in the bus contract, the price for gas was getting closer to $4 a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
So as the price of gas was coming down, the school department was benefiting from that. So that was savings under that contract. Now that the price of gas has come down, a fuel clause at this point in time, the price of gas is only going up. So it actually is not to our benefit. So we do not pay for gas, it's built into the contract.
In 2009, at the time, gas for diesel was about $3 a gallon, and that's what we were basing our numbers on. And for 25 buses driving from a rectangular parking lot downtown Ashland, 9 miles, 4 times a day into Hopkinton, and we're still paying for it a decade later. We wasted over $1 million trying to get something like this done.
Frank, we're desperately trying to get to Article 25 before we hit 11 o'clock.
All right, I agree with my colleagues.
What's
I don't see why we can't take the front of alternative number 1 slide, please. We can see that there's a big green circle there that's not being used, that you can easily fit 30 buses without that green area. I don't mean to be ironic, but from being on the former Green Committee, these buses parked in front of the high school will be the easiest solution. Right now, they're parked in a rectangle covered with tar in Ashland. We could do the same thing in Hopkinton for a lot less than...
Frank, that redesign is not within the scope of this article.
Well, we're getting shown an alternative.
It's either up or down with respect to the article as it's being presented.
All right, I agree with my colleague. There are alternatives. They're not being looked at. I don't think this project is being managed as it should be. I feel frustrated. Thank you.
All right. On my left.
Mark Hyman, 12 Hidden Brick. As a parent who drops off at the middle school and now the high school for several years, I think this redesign is entirely warranted. The parking lot improvement, getting the school buses out of the flow of the parent traffic would be a great benefit. The additional money that's being asked for, $300,000, according to the numbers that were just shown, which are, I assume, the most current numbers, would be paid for in 3 years. This seems to me to be a great investment of the town's money, and I would support it. Thanks.
On my right.
Dave Paul, 7 Meadowland Drive. 2 quick questions. The first one is, if this gets voted down, what would be your next steps? What would you do, knowing that you've already had the $400,000 but not getting the $300,000?
We would not be able to move forward with the $400,000.
So in other words, buses would continue to be parked not within the town.
There would be no
at this
change.
point. Yeah.
So I just want to echo some of the comments real quickly that we've heard. I also believe that this is too small of a space and it's too close to the building itself. I would suggest a different parking location for the buses where they could expand if you needed to. I would also just suggest that you break it up into 2. I am totally for the rerouting of traffic and everything and for the safety. I think that's a different issue than finding a space for the buses to park, because the 2 are independent of each other.
Gary Trendle, 31 Chamberlain.
Not until others have spoken.
Sorry.
On my right.
Brendan Tedstone, 45 Pleasant Street. Just a couple of quick questions. Question number 1, when does the bus, there was a $50,000 secession from the present bus contract. When does that present bus contract end?
So we are just completing the first year of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extensions.
Okay. And has the school department looked at parking buses at Center School, the now vacant Center School?
So the bigger issue is really the drop-off and dismissal in separation of what happens when everyone is exiting the building at the same time.
Thank you.
On my left.
Ted Barker Hook, 75 Grove Street. I live literally within shouting distance of the middle school, so I have some questions about how this will affect our neighborhood. You mentioned that there needs to be lighting, security lighting. Is that 24-hour lighting? The new turf fields have already dramatically, much more than advertised, impact light pollution in our neighborhood. Is this going to be more? What time do the buses come and go? Will there be backup alarms happening at 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning? And if we create 92 new parking spaces, what will that do for traffic in our neighborhood?
So I'll try to remember in order. The lighting question, so this was stipulated by the planning board, what type of lighting was allowed. The light poles themselves, I believe, are 15 feet, and it is night sky compliant, down lighting only. So I don't believe that there would be dramatic effect to the lighting. increasing the parking spaces of 92. These are staff and parents and existing enrollment changes that are already happening. So we're not inviting people that are not already existing onto the campus with the additional parking. It could alleviate some of the parking that happens along the loop road and within parking lots that are actually not spaces. So people are parking not in a space at the current time. And I don't recall the third question. Oh, so when the buses are in the parking lot, they're always staged to be able to pull out directly. So when they pull in, they're pulling in so that when you never want to back up a bus, basically is what it is. So they're pulled in such a way that when they are ready to go, they leave. Straightforward.
On my right.
Ken Dietz, 44 Alexander Road. I have a couple of questions. My understanding was that the buses are going to be parked next to the Marathon School and that extra property we bought. That seems to be off the table now. Secondly, if we don't get the extra $300,000 appropriated tonight, then you're not going to do anything. So what's in the past, whenever a project has not gone forward, the money goes into the Selectmen's General Fund. Is that what's going to happen to $400,000 from last year if we don't go forward with this?
So this would be a borrowing. So basically, it would be money that would not be borrowed.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it would not go to the general fund. We don't have it.
All right, good.
On my left.
Nancy Kavanaugh, 25 Priscilla Road. I am here speaking as a parent, but also as the chair of the school committee. And the thing that we considered, and as a parent who drops off at both the middle school and the high school, that's really important here is the safety of getting the kids behind the school for unloading and loading of the buses. And I know that our public safety officials had spoken at our school committee meeting, and I don't know, I assume they're still here if they wanted to speak to that again. But also the enrollment that we have been talking about all night and the impact that has had on our traffic. And my question, I guess directed at both of your comment, would be that the buses where they are currently queuing, if I am not mistaken, would be impacted and unable to queue properly there in the future with the additional buses that will be necessitated by enrollment growth. True or false?
As we continue, if you look at the place where we are queuing up our buses now for pickup and drop-off, as we continue to add buses, if enrollment continues to go in this same direction, it will become more and more difficult to fit all of the buses in there at the same time, which would mean that you would have some buses that are in that driveway between the middle school and the high school, and that would be another impediment to the traffic flow of parents.
And just one more thought on that. If that becomes our bus parking lot where we park buses at night, during the day when children are in school and those buses aren't running, or when the buses are running, you'll have to have 30 spaces for bus drivers to park their car.
On my right.
Can you go back to the best practice of the traffic flow, please? I had a question about that. It's minor, just passed it, the one with the picture. But if this is a best practice, this goes back to 2004. Is that still operational?
So this is from a paper. Basically, it says site with a layout to avoid.
Okay, so that's still, okay,
So
good.
this having the buses and the parents together with just a small median as that separation, what they're pointing out is this is exactly what you want to avoid in a design.
And that stood the test of time, because
Yes.
I'm not used to best practice being that old. Okay,
Yes.
and the other question, you might have covered this, but does this account for the expansion that you talked about earlier in your previous presentation?
It does. So this bus parking lot now we have designed to accommodate these number of buses and the increase. It also holds the cars for the drivers. So if we continue to add buses, basically what we would do is we would take the places where the drivers' vehicles are, and they would have to carpool themselves to the parking lot. So the buses would become the priority.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the effort that went into this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
On my left.
John Pavlo, 15 Ash Street. I was on the Center School Reuse Committee for a year and a half. One of our criteria was fit into the neighborhood. Parking buses at Center School, which is a residential neighborhood, was ruled out by the committee and also presented to the selectmen. So yes, it was considered. It was not in any way really considered as a fit for Center School, especially with the gym being used now. You would end up having, with the buses there'd be no places for any of the cars to park. There weren't places to park buses when it was an active school, and there's very little room around that school.
Thank you. On my right.
Hi, John Ronan, 211 Hayden Row. I'm speaking as a parent that drops off every day at the high school as well as Hopkins. And safety is right now an accident waiting to happen. I think it's also important to mention that last year we had police and administration out there morning and afternoon watching all of this traffic, the danger to the students. We have inexperienced drivers. We have Hopkins parents that cross that, dismissal time as well. So everything that has been set up this past year was kind of a Band-Aid, knowing that it was going to be addressed. So safety, I think we're sort of missing that's really a factor here.
Thank you. On my left.
Daniel Haskins, 21 Ash Street. Seems to me a lot of work has gone into this. A lot of thought seems to address safety issues and traffic issues and eliminate $100,000 a year contracts, so I appreciate that.
On my right.
However much I do appreciate the research, I feel
Name
that-
and address.
Deborah Feinberg, 12 Prestwick Drive. I do appreciate the research that went into it. I'm still not speaking for it. I think there are other satellite locations in Hopkinton which would still gain the benefit of the $50,000 and potentially the $100,000, and to create a different pathway for the buses in design. So I would really like this to be looked at. So I am not in favor of it, but I do encourage you to do another study and to not leave it alone and drop it.
On my left.
Yes, sir. Mike Shepard, 11 Hill Street. Thank you. I rise in support of this article. The school committee has done over the last 3 or 4 years what I had hoped the DPW and the Board of Selectmen would have done with the sidewalk in the last article. They've designed it. They've had engineers do it. They've priced it. We know it's going to cost this much. This is a no-brainer. We have confidence in the school committee. We have confidence in the thing they do. This is going to come out fine. I have less confidence in the previous one, but we're not talking about that now. Again, I rise in support of this article. Thank you. And I'm not running for anything.
On my right.
Leah Battle Rafferty in Clyde Meadowland, and I am a member of the Board of Assessors, but I am not speaking as such right now. I wanted to, because there's been so much negative, I wanted to bring up kind of, as a parent, what I went through last year, not this current year because they've done a lot of Band-Aids, but last year. I had my kids injured several times trying to get in the snow, in the cold, down to the loop where they're picking up the kids right now. This year as a Band-Aid, what they've done is you can wait until the buses leave. So then my kids are sitting out, whatever weather, until 2:10, so that we can go into the actual loop and pick them up. It is absolutely a safety issue. There is no easy way for those kids to get to where they need to get to right now. It's not about parking the buses overnight, though that is part of it. It is absolutely during that pickup and drop-off time when the buses are in the way, the kids are trying to get out, and kids can get hurt. So I am very pro this, despite the raise in money, because I have experienced it as a safety issue.
And again, on my right?
Oh, me, yeah. Charlie Hayes, 1/3. I just want to move the question.
You knew that was going to happen. All those in favor of, is there a second to that? Second. All those in favor of ending discussion? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have voted to end discussion. We're now ready for a vote. Article 24, school bus parking lot. We're going to take a standing vote because this is going to require 2/3. And I'll note that it's after 11 o'clock, so this is the last article under consideration. I would also ask that until we have completed voting, please don't leave the hall. All those in favor stand with green cards elevated. $15 on the stage.
Mr. Moderator, center front 23.
23 center front.
On the left rear, 31.
Left rear 31.
Mr. Moderator, center rear 15.
Center rear 15.
It's late.
Front left, 21.
Front left 21.
Right side, 41.
41 on the right side, okay? All those opposed, please rise with your green cards extended. None on the stage.
Front left, 3.
Front left 3.
Center front 8.
Center front 8. In favor.
Left rear, 16.
Left rear 16.
Right 13.
Right 13. $146? Double count something.
Center rear, 20.
Center rear, 20. Got 60? 146 in favor, 60 opposed. It meets the two-thirds majority and so passes. Okay? So, if you've had excitement this evening, come back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. for even more.